Hi, welcome to another video. This is Mr. Chow from EnglishTuition.org. This video is about the O-levels English examination. It's going to be a Q&A session. All right, so this will be helpful, I hope, to all those students who are going to take their O-levels English examination at the end of the year.
Oh, what a good question!
Okay, let's start with the editing exercise first. So editing exercise is worth 10 marks. And the first question we have, are there subject-verb agreement errors? Right, for sure there will be. Usually there are about 2 to 3 subject-verb agreement errors. So do look out for these mistakes. Make sure that you catch all the tenses, all the subject-verb agreement. Check whether the subject itself is singular and plural, that type of thing. Okay, and make sure that you score full marks, right, for SVA. Okay, this is very basic for grammar. Next question. Are there any punctuation errors? No, there will never be any punctuation errors for the editing exercise. It will purely be grammar. Are there spelling mistakes? Fortunately, there will not be any spelling mistakes as well. So don't just look at a word that is unfamiliar and think that there's a spelling mistake and then you just try to correct it, because that's not going to happen. Okay, there will not be any spelling mistakes. Is the word choice appropriate? I think I want to rephrase this question. Is the word form appropriate, right? Because it's not a matter of having the suitable word choice, but rather having the suitable word form. In other words, should it be a verb, an adjective, or a noun? All right. A lot of times, right, we are changing between these word forms, right? For example, a verb change to a noun, right? Correct change to correction, okay, or even change to adverb, right? Change to adverb means correctly. Okay, so is the word form appropriate? So do check for that as well. And usually this part that many students they are not very familiar with the word forms, and therefore they lose 1 mark, right? For this type of question. So you can imagine if editing exercise have got lots of word form questions, you may have up to 2 or 3 marks, for example, right? And if you're not good at this, you can easily lose 2 to 3 marks for the editing exercise. Have the correct articles and the be used. So do remember to check for articles as well. A lot of students just use and the and an interchangeably. They do not know what's the difference. So just a quick revision: is a general article and the is a definite article. What's the difference between the two, right? Means it's so general that you cannot pinpoint the actual noun itself, whereas the is definite means that you can pinpoint and identify the noun itself, right? So for example, you have the tallest boy, right? Because I gave you the information tallest, and therefore you can identify the boy. So you have to use the instead of all right? And is just, you have to use, just check whether the words adjective or nouns have the vowel sound, right? A, E, I, O, U. Okay, then you use and. So don't just read the sentences and miss out on the articles, right? You have to check whether they are used correctly or not. Have the correct prepositions been used? Prepositions is another grammar term that has often been overlooked in the editing exercise, because actually a lot of students may not have learned how to use the correct prepositions in the first place, right? So therefore, when they read the editing exercise, it sounds correct to them, okay, when it's actually wrong. So with practice, and if you're well read, you should be able to find the mistakes for the prepositions and then correct them. There are also phrases like phrasal verbs which has a verb as well as a preposition. For example, you have a look up to, right, or stumble upon. Where upon is the preposition, and if you have not seen the phrasal verb before, you will not know what's the correct answer. All right, so it's good to revise, right? What are the phrasal verbs? How are different prepositions being used? And do check for the correct prepositions. Okay, any extra tips for the editing exercise? Don't be too eager to write down the answer. Oftentimes I see students, they read the sentence, all right, and then it sounds incorrect to them. Okay, they always go by it sounds incorrect, which is not recommended. You always want to go by the grammar rule, okay, and then quickly circle the mistake and then just write down the answer. So when that happens, they are prone to making careless mistakes. So always check carefully and make sure that you're 100% confident, if not 99.99% confident, before you write down the answer. Check and double check so that you can give your most confident answers. Okay, next, let's talk about the situational writing. Now, you have to understand what is the purpose of the writing task. The purpose is always given within the question itself, so do read carefully and try not to, try to understand fully, right? What is the purpose? Why are you writing this letter or email, okay? Next, also be aware of who is the intended audience, right? Most of the time, it's a one-to-one communication medium like an email or letter, all right? But sometimes it can be a mass audience like a speech or a talk, and then you have to write appropriately for that intended audience, okay? What is the required format or structure? Well, that depends whether it's an email or letter or proposal. So it's beyond the scope of this video to go into every single one and try to revise the format. So please refer to the notes that have been given to you in class, right? I do give my students notes. Make use of the notes to revise before going to sit for the exam itself. The trick here is you want to be so familiar with the format that you don't waste a lot of time trying to figure out what the format is, right? So you just quickly write down the format and then you start, because you don't actually get to earn a lot of marks just by having the correct format, okay? So most of the marks will come from having the right content, okay, and having good language that is within the answer itself. So don't waste too much time on the format and structure. Now, I would go as far as saying that if you really cannot remember the format during the exam itself, just ignore the format and just go ahead, right? This is not ideal, but you don't want to waste so much time that you don't have time to write the actual answer when you got hung up on the format itself. All right, next question. What details are necessary? As much as possible, try to give your own details. For situational writing, because there's a visual given to you, there's a web page or poster or something, try to use some of the information inside the question, the visual itself, to help you with the details, all right? So the details obviously depends on the task, which means the bullet points that are being given to you. What are they asking for? So read the task carefully so that you can determine the the relevant details that you're looking for. Do not just copy and paste, try to use your own words as much as possible, okay? What tone is appropriate for the audience and purpose? Well, again, that depends on the audience and purpose itself. So the question itself, actually, if you read carefully towards the end, they will tell you to write in the appropriate tone, right? And you give a suggestion, right? Maybe warm and friendly, okay? If you're writing to a cousin or a friend, okay? Or if you're writing to somebody, for business purposes, right? They might ask you to write in a confident and persuasive. In that case, most likely the register is formal. All right, so read the question carefully and make sure you practice, right? You understand if they ask you to write in a warm and friendly tone, what are some of the phrases that you use to convey that tone? If you're asked to write in a more formal, confident, and persuasive tone, again, what are the words and phrases that you use in order to convey that tone? Okay, so please revise on that. And next, what is the recommended word count requirement? Now, situational writing, my recommendation sweet spot is around 400 words. You don't want to go, too excessively lengthy. You don't want to spend too much time on the situational writing itself. And I think most of the time, okay, even though the mark weightage is the same as the essay, you don't want to spend the equal amount of time. The reason is because situational writing, you don't have to plan as hard, all right? Because all you need to do is to just answer all the bullet points, right? The plan is already there. So follow that plan and make sure you give a very tight answer and address all the bullet points, and that's your job, right? So just give it around the 400, maximum I would say 450 word count, right? And then you should move on. Are all the prompts being addressed? The prompts means the task, okay? The right word to use here is the task. So those are the bullet points, always check. Now, some tasks have got two parts instead of one. A lot of times, if you're asked about reasons and benefits, be prepared to elaborate, right, and then give the necessary and relevant details. So if you get feedback from your teacher saying that this part of the answer is not relevant, don't go and argue with the teacher. What you want to do is to try and figure out why is it not relevant. Because if you can't figure that out, then it's very difficult for you to score for the task component. And some of the answers, you may write a very lengthy paragraph, but because they are not relevant, it means that the prompts, the task is not being addressed, and you end up getting 0, okay, just because you're not answering the question, okay? What is considered a proper introduction? Well, introduction, you don't really have to spend a lot of time, but do not give a one-sentence introduction. Always start with a greeting, right? Always polite, whether formal, informal, always start with a greeting. Always start with identifying yourself, okay, and then state the purpose of the writing, okay, because you do it early, people want to know why you're writing this email, why you're writing this letter, okay? So you need to have all these 3 elements in order for it to be considered to be a proper introduction. How to organize the content effectively? Well, for situational writing, most of the time you're just trying to follow the task, the bullet points, right? Some students like to jump around, right? That means task 1, then task 3, task 4, then go back task 2, then 3 and 4. So when you do that, the organization is a little bit messy, and the downside is that sometimes the examiner may just miss some of your points because they do not know where the point belongs to, okay? It's just jumping around. So just try to follow the task fulfillment one by one, right, in a very systematic manner, and you will not go wrong. Does appropriate vocabulary and grammar matter? For sure it does, right? Again, if you're writing for informal, okay, what kind of vocab do you use, right? The sentence structures and everything, they all matter, and this will contribute to the language score of the situational writing, okay, which is worth 20 marks. Next question. Are transitional devices needed? Well, they're not needed, but if you want your writing to flow nicely, okay, and be more coherent, then it's better to use some good transitional devices, right? For example, just write additionally, furthermore, firstly, secondly. It doesn't cost you a lot of time and effort to just put down some of these words, so they are definitely recommended. Next question. How do I ensure that the writing is clear and concise? Now, a lot of times this has to do with the details. So students tend to be a little bit lazy and they don't want to put in the details, right? Especially, let's say you're writing situation writing to propose how you're going to organize an event, right? So definitely a lot of details are needed in terms of the logistics, right? So, but if you're lazy about it, you don't want to include the details, your writing becomes vague, and therefore you'll lose marks for the language component. Also, note your word choices, right? Word choices means don't use a lot of general word, right? I even have students who write, we need to buy some stuff. What do you mean by stuff, right? So that's too general, okay? So you need to give the details, right? So if you're organizing a barbecue, you need to buy some fish and meat and chicken, for example, right? And maybe some marshmallows. So those are the details. Don't just say I want to buy some food for barbecue, okay? So that is very too general, all right? Next question. Do I need to proofread for errors? Of course, that goes without saying, but again, not just proofread for grammatical errors, right? The normal stuff that you should check. Also make sure that you address all the tasks fully for the situation writing, because that is very, very important, all right? How much time should be allocated for the situation writing exercise? Typically between 30 to 40 minutes. If you can work fast, right? You finish within 30-35 minutes. You have more time then to spend and invest in your essay. But if you want to take your time and be careful, you're the type who is meticulous, right? And you want to work on the details, spend up to a maximum of 40 minutes, because don't forget you still have the editing exercise in front, which is taking up some time. Okay, and then you still have to write on a full-length essay, right, for the paper itself. Okay, next, let's proceed to essay writing. What type of essay should I choose? Generally speaking, you have 3 types, right? Your personal recounts, your discursive, as well as your argumentative essay. By now, you should know what they look like and how to identify the question types. The type of essay that you should choose depends on your strength, right? So if you tend to do better in personal recounts, then you choose personal recounts. If you tend to enjoy and do better means that you actually get some feedback from the teachers that you can actually score for discursive, then maybe you want to choose discursive, right? But if you do not have the skills for, let's say, very challenging argumentative essays, then please do not choose those type of essays. So I don't know how much practice you have gotten into each type of essay. So please refer back to your past essays. Choose the essays that you've really gotten a ton of data on, and they give you very positive feedback, and you have a higher confidence, right? Attempting those kind of essays, right? Those are the type of essay questions that you should choose. Should I strictly stick to the recommended word count? Well, recommended word count is always not enough. All right, so the answer is no. The sweet spot is actually about 450 to 500 words for the essay. While some students can write a bit more, I think give it an upper limit of say 600 words, right? But I think 500 words is more than enough to showcase that you have the language skills. So there's no need to write an overly lengthy answer. Okay, next question. How much time should I allocate to my essay? If depending on how much time you spend in the first two sections, right, the editing and the situation writing, most of the time, ideally, you should have between 50 to 60 minutes to allocate to your essay. Anything below that, I think you're just compromising on the quality of the essay. You just don't have enough time, right, to write a very good quality answer, right? You don't have time to develop the essay because you invest too much time on the other sections. So not more than 60 minutes, roughly about sweet spot, right? 60 minutes. Can I write a story that is completely fictional? Well, in theory, yes, okay, but in practice, I do not recommend students do so because I've been teaching for about 10 years and I've seen all kinds of stories that are being written by students. And the problem with this approach is that when you write a story that's completely fictional, that means purely based on imagination, it's not true, it never happened, all right? What is typically going to happen is that the story itself has a lot of plot holes, they're illogical, they're not very sensible, all right, because it's purely based on imagination, and therefore they lose a lot of marks. Okay, most of the time they just get a borderline pass because they're just making things up. They are not true, and it's not very sensible at all. So I do not recommend this approach. If you're writing a personal recount, I don't think it's that hard to just write a personal recount based on mostly truth, right? Mostly your own true personal experiences. It's just easier to write that way. You don't even have to brainstorm for ideas. You just need to recall what happened in the past and then just write down the story and bring out the highlights and you're done, okay? So you avoid a lot of the cons of, the drawbacks of writing a fictional story, okay? So let's move on. Next question. How should I approach the essay component? Well, the typical approach is that you want to spend the beginning of, before you even start writing, okay, you need to assess the question itself. Try to choose the right question that plays to your strength, all right? That's step number one. After that, you want to spend about 5 to 10 minutes to try and plan for the overall structure of the essay itself so that you know what points you're going to write. If you're writing a discursive, what examples you're going to give. If you do not do that, you run the risk of writing the essay halfway and then you're stuck and you don't know what examples to give, right? And you think, what other examples can I write? But I'm out of ideas. Should I restart the question? And then you're just in a fix, okay? So just spend a little bit of time, 5-10 minutes to plan for the essay and a lot of all those problems will go away, okay? And then after that, once you're confident with the overall plan, then you can start writing, okay? Then now's the time to fill in the details and that's the approach that I would recommend, okay? Next question. How can I ensure that my essay is coherent? Well, it has to do with your language use. Okay, we mentioned before, try to use transitional devices to make sure that it flows properly. You want to organize your points so that, like for example, a positive point, and then a negative point, right? So a well-organized essay also will help for you to write the answer and make it more coherent itself. So plan well in advance, right? We've spoken about that. Use transitional devices, we've also spoken about that. And also use appropriate vocabulary that delivers your answers clearly. So this testing your language skills, right? So again, write in a more specific manner rather than writing in a more general manner as we have discussed earlier. How should I start my essay? Well, interesting question. Well, it depends whether you choose personal recount or descriptive or some kind of hybrid question, or whether it's a discursive or argumentative. A lot of times, well, the basic idea is just you want to hook the reader and there are just so many ways to do it, right? You can use a question, you can use a sound, you can use a very bold statement, you can use a quotation. There are many ways you can start your essay. Okay, there's no one way. So just pick the one that you're confident with, and then just go with it. And once you start writing your essay, build up the momentum, and you should be on the road. Okay, how should I conclude my essay? Again, that depends on the type of essay that you choose to write. So if you're writing a personal recount, you might want to write a reflection. If you're writing a discursive essay, maybe you want to write your final opinion. Or if you're writing an argumentative essay, then you might want to write an overall evaluation after you have presented your arguments, right? So it all depends on the type of question that you choose. Next question. For discursive essay, is a stand necessary? And the answer is no, but it is recommended that you have a stand, right? Since you're going to have some opinions, you're going to have some views, it's better for you to have a stand. It's easier to approach the essay that way, so I recommend having a stand, although it's optional. Okay, next question. For discursive essay, is a counter argument necessary? So don't get confused. Discursive essay, you're just discussing, right? So positive points, negative points. There's no need for a counter argument, right? The counter argument is more for the argumentative essay, all right? Next question, I'm not sure how to write a counter argument. Should I attempt an argumentative essay at this late stage, right? If you're not sure how to put together, a good answer for an argumentative question, right? Question that asks you, do you agree? How far do you agree? Then my recommendation is that don't touch these questions at all. It's very unlikely that during the O-levels that you get 4 questions that are all argumentative essay questions. Very unlikely. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's impossible. Okay, so the paper is going to be quite fair, so you are going to have options. You may have options to write on personal recount, descriptive writing, or discursive essays, right? So if you're not feeling confident about argumentative essay, then don't pick this question type. What is a good way to conclude an essay? So I think I mentioned this, answer this previous question, right? Depends on the question, right? Personal recounts, reflections are highly valued, right? Discursive opinions are highly valued, right? And argumentative evaluations are highly valued. So make sure you know how to do, each one. Okay, write very effectively for each type of essay question. What should I check for when proofreading? You want to check whether you have a variation of sentence structures. And a lot of times, I don't know why, especially for situational writing, okay? Students like to just use the word also, right? Then they don't have to think of transitional devices, right? Instead of saying, in addition, I have this, right? They tend to write, I can also. So it's a repetition of the same sentence structures, which is no good. It will not earn you marks for the language component. Use appropriate phrases and expressions, given the right context. What are the best phrases that you can think of, right? You can even think of certain similes or metaphors, for example, right, to show that you know how to use them, okay, in the right context. And then watch out for general grammar mistakes, misspellings, punctuation, etc. So that goes without saying. So if you go back and proofread and check for all these 3 areas, then you will be able to improve the overall quality of your essay, okay? Okay, let's move on very quickly to the O-levels paper 2, and we start with the visual comprehension, right? And how many texts are there in the visual comprehension exercise? Well, new syllabus, as we all know, have been changed from 1 text to 2 texts, right? And how many questions are there? Typically, there are about 4 questions, which is worth about 5 marks in total, all right? I think from experience, the new syllabus is considered slightly easier compared to the old syllabus because the old syllabus are all open-ended questions. There are no multiple choice. But the new syllabus have got 3 questions in multiple choice, so most students are able to get at least a 3 out of 5. So you take the visual comprehension as a kind of a warm-up, right? I know you may be a little bit nervous during the actual exam itself, so just use the visual comprehension, okay, to help you to calm down a little bit more and try to do well for this section. What are some common question types? Question that asks you about the main ideas, but very clear how to answer them. Question that asks you about the target audience, that you answer need to be very specific. Okay, questions, language question, vocab questions, they might ask you words that have similar meanings, for example, right? How do you know that this book is very popular? Okay, so what's another word for popular? Maybe you find the word bestseller. Okay, that's an example of a language question in a visual comprehension exercise. Questions that test understanding of the tone and register. So these type of questions usually they are not present in the old syllabus, but for new syllabus in the MCQ, mostly the last two questions, they might test which text is being written in the informal register, for example, right? So you need to choose whether it's text 1, text 2, both, or neither. Okay. Question that test reading skill, right? For example, ask you about some detail, right? They might ask you which text addresses the reader directly, right? So you need to go in and look for the pronoun you or your, in order to answer that question, right? Some students, they go back to the text and read and they say they cannot find. Okay, so that's a reading skill in itself. You need to look out for the smallest detail, right? Okay, next we have to tackle the narrative comprehension. Question: how many marks are awarded for this section? Total 20 marks. Are there language questions in this section? Actually, most of the language questions will actually be in the narrative comprehension section. Because it's a story-based comprehension, so they are likely to be characters as well. That's where a lot of students fumble, right? They do not understand the development of the characters, okay? Or they may not understand certain contextual clues that are within the passage that tell them something about the character, right? About their behavior, and that's when they make mistakes, okay? So yes, there are language questions in this section.
Yes!
What are some key comprehension skills needed to do well in this section? Detailed reading, looking up for contextual clues. I think this is the most important for all the sections, right? Because a lot of times in the story itself, they do not tell you directly, right? What's the main message? So students need to do their, make their own educated guesses based on contextual clues. Sometimes these will come across in inferential question, right? And we'll come back to that later. Okay, so this is one of the essential skills. Paraphrasing is another one, because a lot of times you need to explain certain phrases, okay, and paraphrase certain keywords. Next question.
Oh my god!
How do I tackle inferential questions, right? So again, contextual clues, accuracy is needed to be awarded the mark when you paraphrase, all right? So for example, what does the phrase jumped in recklessly suggest about Bob's attitude? So the incorrect answer is that you just say he had a negative attitude because you guessed that recklessly is negative. This answer is too vague, and generally you will not be awarded the mark. So one possible answer is that he had an appetite for risk, or if you want to include the word attitude in your answer, you could write he had a negligent attitude, right? So that's another possible answer. If you try to have the answer that's as accurate as possible, as long as it's a very reasonable answer, most likely you will be awarded the mark. Okay, finally, how do I approach the flowchart? The flowchart is very important because it's worth 4 marks out of 20 marks. Read for contextual clues. Again, contextual clues, right? Match all parts of the helping phrase, because nowadays the helping phrase is like a bit lengthy, 3, 4, even 4, 5 words, right? So make sure you match every single part, right? Answers need to be an exact match for accuracy purposes, right? For example, if there are 2 dogs in the helping phrase, then you need to find 2 dogs in that same paragraph, right? If you only see 1 dog, then that is not the correct answer, okay? Now, be prepared to make revisions if needed, right? For example, you choose an answer for the first blank, but some students, just feel so confident that they don't go back and make revisions. But if it turns out that that answer is supposed to go to number 3 or number 4, right, then he's going to get another answer wrong, right? So he loses 2 marks instead of 1. So as you work with the exercise, all right, just be prepared. You may just need to go back and cancel maybe the earlier answers, right? Just because the answers are more suitable for the later blanks, okay? Okay, finally, we have the last section, which is the non-narrative comprehension. And that just means non-narrative means it's no longer story-based. So I'm not sure why. I think some school papers I've seen, they write historical stories and they categorize that as non-narrative. But typically for non-narrative in the O-level syllabus, there are usually no like characters, right? Because it's not a story, that's why it is non-narrative. Okay, so it's more straightforward, right? Informational, factual type of text for the non-narrative comprehension. First question, how many marks for this section? 25 marks. Next question. What are some key skills that are needed? Information transfer is very important, identifying relevant details and then just transfer the answer. Now, if the question never asks you to answer in your own words, don't be too clever and try to paraphrase the answer. Just leave the relevant answers and form your own answer to the question, and then you are done. Okay, identifying evidence. Now, there is the point of view question in non-narrative, right, where you have the two talking heads with the speech bubbles, and that part itself is worth usually 3 marks, right? And you want to have this skill and to be able to identify the correct evidence to support that point of view. Okay, so you must learn how to do that. Compare and contrast. Usually you find this in the non-narrative comprehension section. They might give you different questions. For example, they might give you a table, right, and ask you to fill in. Okay, so that you are able to demonstrate that you have understood what is different with the nouns that are being mentioned, right? For example, different animals have different hunting methods, right? Different fruits may look similar, but they're also different, right? How are they different? And then you just fill up the table. Are there language questions? Well, yes, language questions can exist in anywhere in the paper, but for non-narrative, usually just 1 to 3 marks maximum, I think, right, for language question, because don't forget, excluding the summary, the front part open-ended question, short answer question is only worth 10 marks. So there's not a lot of room for language question, right? And point of view is already worth 3 marks. Okay, so that leaves very little room for language questions. How to score for the summary exercise? Now, summary exercise is worth 15 marks. 8 marks for points, 7 marks for language. So what you want to do is to try to get 8 out of 8 for the points, right? Make sure you count the points, right? When you're trying to identify the points and get 8 if not more, okay? And then you try to summarize. And to score for language, you actually have to make an effort to paraphrase the keywords as accurately as you can in order to score high for language. So some students who are very weak in language, they just don't have the confidence to paraphrase, then you can expect to score 1 mark, 2 marks, maybe even 0, okay? If you just leave the entire sentence or phrase out of the passage, all right? So with that, we have come to the end of today's video. So for those of you who may be taking the O-Levels English examination in the near future and you wish to sign up for lessons, just visit EnglishTuition.org. And do remember to leave a like and a subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck for your exams, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye-bye.